All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for waiting for us to get started. Those of you who weren't able to tune in to our previous installments of the forum, where we heard from our candidates for the various faculty representative and committee chairperson positions on Monday and Tuesday, respectively, please be sure to check out recordings of those proceedings on Facebook and YouTube the officer at the UWI St. Augustine Guild of Students. And as you all know, we are less than 24 hours away from the start of our guild election, scheduled to begin tomorrow at 8 a.m. Campaigning ends tonight promptly at 11:59. So, provided that your registration and financial clearance status have a secure link to cast your vote in the election, tailored to your own circumstances. So, for instance, if you are a student in the Faculty of Social Sciences, you'll be able to cast your vote for the FSS rep, but not for any other faculty representative. Tonight, we'll be hearing from our candidates for the various Guild executive positions. The Guild executive consists of the president, vice president, treasurer, postgraduate representative, and secretary. Their mandate, outlined in the Guild Constitution, is to manage the daily affairs and operation of the Guild of Students and to facilitate the fulfillment of the directives and decisions made by the Guild Council. To that end, the executive is also empowered to make decisions on behalf of the Guild Council and is thus a critical component in the operation of the institution. Tonight, we have a great lineup of candidates. We have some new faces and some familiar faces. However, everyone is eager to hear what our candidates have to say. So we're going to open tonight's proceedings with a reel of candidates. And please note that the order in which candidates appear on the following reel is the order in which they will be addressing you tonight. So please allow me to present our candidates for the 2022 Guild executive positions for our election. And there we have it, a fantastic showing from our candidates there. Please show some support in the chat and start thinking of your questions. So we're going to dive right into the substantive proceedings for tonight. So we'll be starting with the office of the Guild Secretary. The Guild Secretary is responsible for ensuring that the minutes, resolutions, and motions passed by the Guild Council and the Guild are properly recorded, noted, and for maintaining files and records, and for the timely dissemination of information within the Guild Council. The Guild Secretary is not merely a minute taker, however, but a full-fledged member of the executive, constitutionally mandated to work with the President to see to the welfare of all workers, and with a wide range of other functions as well. I'm quite excited to hear what our candidate for the position of Guild Secretary has to say this evening, so please allow me to welcome on screen Ms. Tyler Marie Mungle.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just making sure you can hear me. Okay, great. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Marie Mungle, and I am the Guild Secretary candidate for this year's election. And before I begin my presentation, I would just like to thank everyone present here this evening for participating in this public forum. This is arguably one of, or the most important part of the campaigning process, and the fact that these forums continue to be hosted by the election committee and attended by you, the students, the electorate, is an indication that democracy is alive and well in the Guild of Students. It is also of the utmost importance that we all educate ourselves as much as possible on who our election candidates are and what their plans are for office so that we may be able to make as well an informed decision as we possibly can come March 24th, so tomorrow. Next slide, please. Okay, so before I discuss with you some of the projects I intend to undertake as secretary, I would just like to share a little bit about myself. I am a student in the Faculty of Science and Technology in my fourth and final year pursuing a Bachelor of Science General with a double major in biochemistry and chemistry. And I plan on starting a Master of Science program in Food Science and Technology from the Faculty of Engineering from September. I have been the project manager in the office of the Guild Treasurer for the past 2 years. So I've worked both with the current treasurer, Bradley Osborne, and the previous Guild Treasurer, Nikolai Chehong. I am also the committee chairperson of the newly formed Entrepreneurship and Innovation Committee, which is under the purview of the Office of the Guild President, where our aim has been to assist student entrepreneurs in building and growing their businesses with the end goal of greater financial security. Next slide, please. As was said to me by the Guild President, Mr. Sandy, he said, the secretary is the mecca of efficiency in the Guild Council. It requires, or rather demands, of the individual holding the position that they hold councillors to a certain standard and to ensure that the council itself continues to function effectively and efficiently. And while much of my work would be behind the scenes, so to speak, there is much change that can happen here. And if elected as the next Guild Secretary, some of the plans I have are as follows. The first includes Guild constitutional reform and amendments. As it currently exists, the most recent version of the Guild Constitution was amended in 2009, and it doesn't include rules specific to councillors such as the Guild Librarian or any committees which may have been formed between 2009 and now. Additionally, much of the language which is used in the Constitution is open to interpretation or rather misinterpretation as it pertains to certain matters. And that can often cause a certain level of confusion or uncertainty when we're seeking to clarify particular issues. So I hope to work with the Guild Constitution Committee, the Student Senate, and Campus Legal Office in order to make the necessary amendments so that the Constitution can truly serve as a just guide of order in the Guild. Secondly, I would like to draft a policy or a set of guidelines which committee chairpersons are required to follow in order to appoint persons to their committees. Right now, there isn't a formal process or guidelines which councillors are required to follow in order to appoint persons to their committees. And so, as you might imagine, this essentially gives councillors free rein to possibly appoint persons that they may have personal connections with, as opposed to persons who are truly passionate about the work that the Guild is doing or who possess the required skill set for the particular positions. It is the council's duty to ensure that there is at all times accountability and transparency in processes such as these so that we can continue to serve the students well and meet their needs as best as possible. And I truly believe that implementing a policy like this would be a massive step in the right direction. Finally, I would also like to work with counselors, especially the Guild Librarian and the PRO, to make relevant information more accessible to the student body. The Guild Council is accountable to the student body who has elected them, and with the expectation of transparency and fair representation at every level, and they deserve nothing less. So currently, the Guild hosts annual general meetings to which students are invited, and at these meetings, Guild budgets and expenditure reports are discussed along with progress made by certain councillors on relevant issues. However, documents detailing these events should be more readily available to students so that they can be accessed at any time. Additionally, councillors are expected to submit regular progress reports updating their fellow councillors and the student body on their accomplishments and their future plans throughout the tenure. These reports are currently available via the OneDrive feature on Microsoft that is made accessible with our student email addresses. But I can tell you from personal experience that it's actually quite difficult to navigate if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. So I'm hoping to work with the Guild Librarian and the PRO in order to make the process of accessing these documents easier and informing students of the information which is available to them. I would just like to take this opportunity to wrap up my presentation and once again thank everyone for participating in this public forum and assure you that if elected as your next guild secretary, I will do my very best to ensure that you, the student body, receive the representation of which you are deserving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Mungle. Sorry, I was having a bit of technical difficulties there. I see we have our first question. What are some of the guidelines you would like to mandate for the appointment of standing committees, and how would that work with committees already appointed in accordance with the Constitution?
Okay, what are some of the guidelines I would like to implement? Okay, so basically, the when we're talking about guidelines, we want to make sure that there is absolute transparency. So right now, with in accordance to appointing committee members, uh, the only person that's actually required to be in the interview is actually the elected committee chairperson. So one of the guidelines that I am considering is allowing at least two other members from the Guild Council, one of them being from the Guild Executive, to ensure that there is transparency throughout the entire process and that there is no favoritism on the part of the committee member.
All right, and you're hearing me okay? Because I have another question for you. Do you think you have an adequate understanding of how meetings of the Guild Council are currently structured and run to be able to enact your plans for the future?
Yeah, I think I have a fairly adequate understanding of how it's run, being having been around not necessarily I'm not on the guild, but having been around people who are on the guild and who have experience with being on the guild council and being involved in guild council meetings. I'm sure there are a lot of things I don't know, but it's all a learning process, and I don't expect that I'll have much difficulty once I get into the position.
All right, and one last question as we close. Noting that the Guild Secretary is, of course, a member of the executive. At the campus council meeting last week, it was noted that tuition fees were last increased for students in 2001. What are your thoughts on a potential increase of tuition fees for students?
That's a good question. For me, I'm a little torn between the about the idea, considering because I understand that to a point, the stance that university is taking with regards to raising tuition. It's been, you said, since 2001, so that's 2 decades. It's been 2 decades. It's a long time. Um, Expenses have increased a lot, but it's also a difficult time, I think, right now to implement such an increase due to the fact that a lot of people are just starting to recover from a lot of the economic loss that they would have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, which we, might I add, we're still in, and we're still feeling a lot of the economic effects. So I am not 100% opposed to the idea of raising tuition, but I don't think that now is the right time to implement that.
All right. Well, thank you for that response. I see that you have a large amount of supporters here in the chat, and it was definitely a pleasure hearing from you tonight. So we'll now be moving on to our next set of candidates. So thank you again, Ms. Mongol, and we'll see how well you fare tomorrow. Best of luck and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
All right. So next on tonight's agenda, we have our candidates for the position of Guild Treasurer. The Guild Treasurer serves as the chairperson of the Finance Committee and is responsible for ensuring that accounting policies and procedures of the Guild are in accordance with those of the university, for preparing control accounts for the Guild, preparing estimates of income and expenditure and final accounts, and for authorizing the disbursement and collection of all monies as approved by the Guild Council and raised during fundraising activities, respectively. Tonight we have with us our two candidates for the position of Guild Treasurer, and without further ado, please let us welcome our first candidate to the floor, Ms. Aishwarya Maharaj. Hi
Good night,
Aishwarya, the floor is
everyone.
yours.
Okay. Good night, everyone. I hope that you all are doing well on this lovely Wednesday. I just want to start off by saying what an honor it is to be here tonight. I am so incredibly thankful for the opportunity to discuss the plans and initiatives that I believe would help enhance student life at UWI. A brief introduction about me. My name is Aishwarya Maharaj. I'm a Year 1 medical student, and I'm currently contesting the position of Guild Treasurer for the 2022-2023 academic year. Now, you may be asking, what is my motivation for running? Well, ever since I knew about the Guild, I felt impassioned and empowered by the amazing advocacy efforts that they stand for. I believe that the concept of a unified student representative body that voices the concerns of students and has the students' best interest at heart is absolutely amazing. So once I saw the opportunity for candidacy, I knew I had to be a part of it all. And coming from running my very own business and having to solely deal with all the financial responsibility, I felt that treasurer was the ideal position for me. And as such, I am here before you today to campaign the ideas that I would like to implement in my tenure if I am elected as treasurer. So, next slide, please. Right, yes. So my experience includes being treasurer of the Student Activities Committee branch of the Medical Sciences Student Council. I'm also the faculty ambassador for the UWI Association of Debating and Public Speaking, and I'm also the web designer for the Trinidad and Tobago Medical Students Association. So based on this, I have amassed a great amount of experience throughout my academic career. I also have a great deal of practical experience in leadership roles, but also in positions where I'm entrusted to competently manage the finances of the various organizations that I represent. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, while waiting for this slide to change, okay, perfect. So the first point so why should I be treasurer? Let me explain some of my campaign plans I have if I am elected in the position of treasurer. So the first point, greater financial advocacy for up-and-coming clubs. I firmly believe that clubs and extracurricular activities are the backbone of student life on campus. They lead to students having a culturally enriched, well-rounded, and balanced academic career. Furthermore, these clubs are incredibly crucial as they appeal to prospective applicants, both locally and internationally, as they are what contribute to a deeply revered university experience. So more needs to be done to ensure the continuation of current clubs, but also motivate the introduction of new clubs. As such, if I am elected as treasurer, I will ensure that there is some sort of financial incentive for these clubs in the remit of increased funding, donations, or sponsorships to foster a climate in which holistic student development is encouraged. My second point is increased financial awareness towards members of the student body. We all know the unprecedented impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought about on us. There were jarring changes to the financial situation of almost everyone, some for the better, but most for the worse. And if I am elected as Guild Treasurer, I will have a responsibility to ensure that these financial interests of the students are best represented, especially in these unprecedented times. So firstly, I firmly believe that there needs to be a greater allocation of funds to bridge this technological gap that became so pervasive throughout the lockdown. And despite school opening back in September, we all know how fickle this pandemic situation is. So it would be irresponsible of me to not prepare for this situation, especially given the dynamic nature of the situation that we are in. Another initiative I would like to implement is a faculty grant to assist those students who are struggling to meet their tuition needs. I want to commend the Faculty of Humanities and Education for starting an initiative like this. And if I am elected as treasurer, I will ensure that the same goes for all faculties here at UWI. I will facilitate greater communication with the respective faculty representatives so that provisions are available. And I believe a localized approach compared to a generalized one would be more effective and productive, as each faculty has different tuition fees, different requirements, and as such, a localized grant respected to each faculty ensures that every student, regardless of their program, has the ability to receive financial assistance proportionate to their financial needs. Furthermore, I strongly believe more needs to be done regarding regional students. COVID did not only adversely impact Trinidad and Tobago, but our Caribbean neighbors as well. So there needs to be greater liaison with regards to the National and International Affairs Committee chairperson to implement the financial grant, financial provision, and assistance to those regional students who need it. Point 3, advocate for the reduction of unnecessary financial constraints on students. I strongly believe that there needs to be a constant updating of current policies to take into consideration the ever-changing situations of students during this unprecedented time. Policies implemented before the pandemic cannot be used to govern a post-lockdown mode of life. And if I am elected as treasurer, I will ensure that the financial interests of the students are best represented through restructuring of policies that are no longer currently applicable. Because no student should have to worry about their academic career or education being threatened by a systemic inequity that they face that is out of their control. And last but not least, I would like to foster a greater spirit of teamwork and camaraderie amongst the Guild Council and the student body. Communication is imperative in this role. I aim to represent you. I aim to voice your concerns, and I want to ensure that all the queries, issues, and suggestions that you have are adequately taken into consideration, especially since the decisions that the Guild Council make has a direct impact on you, the students. So increase communication via monthly forums, posts on social media, polls implemented so we all get a better understanding of the sentiments of the student body. So that way we can make decisions that would be in your best financial interest. Now, these are but a snapshot of the many ideas I have if I'm elected for the position of treasurer. Again, throughout my tenure, I will provide unrelenting and uninterrupted financial advocacy for you, the students. So vote for me, Ashwarya Maharaj, because a vote for me is a vote for honesty, integrity, and competence. Thank you.
Well spoken, Ashwarya. I see we have a couple questions from the audience, so I'm going to put them on the screen here. First up, what would you say are some of the unnecessary financial constraints that you're referencing, and how do you plan to advocate for their removal since the UA is planning on raising tuition fees?
Yes, that is an excellent question. Thank you for that. So, with the current pandemic situation, there has been a change, a marked shift in the way we approach education on a whole. And the fees and compulsive financial constraints that were placed before the pandemic may not be as applicable or may need some restructuring in regards to how they are approaching now, especially considering that every time you turn on the news, you hear about the difficult economic situation that citizens are facing. So if I were elected as Guild Treasurer, I would ensure that there is a restructuring of the fee policy. Maybe we can look at what fees are necessary right now. Maybe we can also implement subsidies again, because no two students are the same. We don't want to broad brush all the students and put them in a category. We want to look at their needs because at the end of the day, as treasurer, I want to advocate for your financial interests. So I have some ideas and reforms of what I want to do in regards to these structural policies. But yes, thank you.
All right, well said. And of course, we all enter service on the Guild Council with ideas as to how we could better advocate for students. But a lot of the time, there's a lot of pushback in terms of the existing administration within the university, not seeing eye to eye with our goals. So, how do you plan to navigate and see your goals through, notwithstanding that issue there?
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. With everything in life, there is always some sort of conflict, there's always some sort of pushback. But I believe that the goals that I have set, one, are in the best interests of the students, which I think is paramount in any institution, that the financial situations that the students are accounted for, so that every student has a right to uninhibited education. But if there is, and furthermore, I also believe that the goals that I have set out are not impossible to achieve. I believe that they're fully attainable, and I have an excellent, I see the candidates and I see their plans, and all of us have a similar mindset of working together, raising more fundraising initiatives, having more streams of income to try and better provide for the students and advocate for the students so no financial constraints can hold them back.
All right. Well, I think that is time for us this evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well said. I see you have many supporters in the chat, so best of luck to you tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your night. Now we'll be moving on to our next candidate for the position of Guild Treasurer. Please welcome to the floor Miss Makisha Thomas, everyone. Show some support for Makisha in the chat as we welcome her to the floor. Good evening,
Good afternoon,
Makisha.
everyone. Are you all hearing me clearly? Good evening. My name is Makisha Thomas, and I am your candidate for Guild Treasurer 2022. I am currently a Year 2 student pursuing my degree in banking and finance. Next slide, please. Some of my hobbies include, but are not limited to, baking, cooking, being in nature, environmental preservation, and being in nature, hiking, going to the beach, things like that. I enjoy doing. I am also an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur has taught me many skills, such as time management and management of finances, all of which I plan to effectively use to fulfill the duties of Guild Treasurer. Within my 2 years of UE, I have joined various clubs, one being the Association of Debating and Public Speaking, where I served as the Chief Financial Officer, as well as the head of the Finance Committee. Performing duties in this capacity has taught me teamwork and problem solving, all key attributes to the position of a treasurer. Next slide, please. You'll wonder, why do I want to become treasurer and what are my plans if I become treasurer? I would like to become your next Guild Treasurer because I believe I possess the innovative ideas, a fresh perspective, as well as all of this is driven by my passion and enthusiasm to serve my fellow peers, as well as this would also be a great stepping stone in my career path of finance. If elected, I will do my utmost best to foster a climate of openness between the student body and Guild when it comes to financial sourcing and expenditure. This will also cover other financial related concerns, as well as lending a listening ear to students' financial obstacles. Because we all know we are coming out of a pandemic or still in a pandemic, and the climate is different. So it's always good to lend a listening ear to the students because they are the ones who I will be elected to serve. According to Warren Buffett, someone sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Let me repeat that quote because that's something that resonates with me. Someone sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. This relates to what we do now and how it will impact our future. With that being said, I intend to collaborate with the Guild on the development of financial planning workshops such as, but not limited to, budgeting seminars and financial investment talks geared towards teaching financial strategies as well as tools that will prepare each and every one of us for life beyond university. I also plan to enlist the help of the private sector in order to increase the Guild's support and sponsorship. In this circumstance, additional financing implies that the Guild will be able to accomplish more obligations, conduct more developmental seminars and activities. This will also help in the revitalization of the campus experience. We all know that we are going back out to September, and we all want, I don't know about you all, but I for sure want that genuine campus experience. This will be able to happen once the Guild gets additional funding and we have more money to allocate to different programs and events. Finally, I intend to increase the efficiency of the finance team by successfully engaging all members through examination and comprehension of everyone's strengths and weaknesses. This will allow for the creation of a strategy that maximizes efficiency, but also ensuring that everyone's inputs are heard. I am reliable, dedicated, and transparent individual who plans to serve the Guild of Students with integrity and pride. Have no fear. Vote Makisha Thomas on March 24th as your new Guild Treasurer and leave all your financial worries to me.
All right, thank you for that, Makisha. Well said. We have many questions, so I'm going to take this opportunity to start putting them on the screen so that you can address them yourself. So first up, what is one principle you plan to stick to if elected?
Great question. One principle I plan to stick to is the principle of not promising things I cannot deliver on. That is one thing that I plan not to give students lies or anything to make them feel good. I plan to give them all the facts and not promise anything that I know for certain I cannot deliver on.
All right, and another question has come in. You want to boost the private sector's sponsorship of the Guild. How do you intend to encourage companies to take the initiative to do so?
That's a great question. I plan to reach out to these companies and show them the great work the Guild has done thus far. And the Guild speaks for themselves. After seeing all the things that the Guild has done thus far, I am sure they will be encouraged to sponsor certain events and help us.
All right, you have many questions here in the chat. Why do you want to implement financial planning workshops?
This is a really great question. I want to implement financial planning workshops because I believe this is something that is not taught in school and we are not equipped for when we go out into the real world, whether it be after secondary school or after university. So financial planning is very crucial to our survival after schooling, whether it be secondary or tertiary.
All right, and now we have a question from our incumbent FHE representative, and it's related to the last, which is how would you go about engaging members of the private sector to obtain funds?
I would go about engaging the members of the private sector by just simply reaching out to their public relations team, and from there I will get the information needed to contact the person that could help the Guild with funding.
All right. And I think that would be about time. However, if our previous speaker is still with us, Aishwarya, are you still here? If so, I'll have you both on screen and I'll give you some questions with both of you having the opportunity to respond. These are all from the chat related to the position of treasurer. So let's start with this one, which I'll sum up as, what plans do you have for students who are struggling to pay for their tuition? Aishwarya, you can start us off with this one.
Okay, so as mentioned, I want to implement a lot of grants because I'm aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult. It has changed the economic situation for many families and many students. So I want to implement grants not only for the respective faculties so that each student gets a proportionate amount based on their tuition fees. I can speak for my faculty. My program is $70,000 a year. So a grant that is respective for a different faculty with a small tuition fee obviously would not be proportionate. And I also want to ensure that regional students are included. Furthermore, I want to reduce as mentioned in the question beforehand, I want to ensure that there may be subsidies implemented, do some policy reform on the financial constraints of students, all this to take into consideration because I know that there's a difficult situation for lots of people right now financially.
All right, well said. Makisha, over to you.
Great question. I actually have two solutions to that. As I said, I'll reach out to the public sector for funding. This funding can be redirected to scholarships to help with tuition, as well as I can advocate for work study programs that can help our students to work while going to school in order to help with paying off their tuition.
All right, and I will field this final question from our incumbent Faculty of Medical Sciences representative to both of you as well, this time starting with Makisha. Uh, Given the restrictive nature of policies by the university, how do you plan to find ways to support the guild committees in case of emergencies?
Okay, I would plan in case of emergencies. I would implement a fund called the Emergencies Fund, in which that you just have to either contact the treasurer or the president in order to get funds from that fund. That fund would be dedicated to emergencies specifically.
Over to you, Aishwarya.
Right, yes. So given the restrictive nature, I mean, obviously you don't want to just give out funds and you want to have a certain criteria, but there needs to be a sense of agency if there is a case of emergencies. So in this regard, I want to make sure that there's a streamlined process, that they don't have to wait 2 or 3 days for approval, that there's a streamlined way in which people who need funds in an emergency situation can access it very quickly. It's already preempted, pre-planned, and is there in a worst case scenario, which it should not be because we should try to prevent these such situations from occurring beforehand. But it's there, it's a streamlined process, and it's accessible most importantly.
All right, I think that will have to bring us to the end of our treasurer segment this evening. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what either of you will do if elected. I wish you both the best tomorrow. Well spoken from both of you once again. And please
Thank
enjoy the rest of your night. We'll
Thank
now
you.
be moving along. So, up next tonight, we have another hotly contested seat, and that is for the office of the postgraduate representative. According to the Guild Constitution, the postgraduate representative is responsible for representing the interests of all postgraduate students to the Guild Council, the respective faculty boards, and at relevant university meetings. The brevity of that line, however, certainly betrays the true scope of that commitment. The PG rep is responsible for promoting maximum participation in activities related to postgraduate students, organized by the Guild Council, of course, and others which advance the position of postgraduate students within the university community. The PG rep also serves as president of STAPS, the St. Augustine Association of Postgraduate Students, so the list of responsibilities is certainly numerous. With that being said, please welcome to the floor our first candidate for the position, Miss Emily Anna Bechan. Good evening, Emily. The floor
Good
is yours.
evening. Thank you very much. I would just like to say thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. So, as you know, my name is Emiliana Beechan. I'm currently nominated to be your incoming postgraduate representative. I'm also currently an MSc Mediation Studies candidate at UWI, and I've recently graduated with my BSc Psychology in Special with honors from UWI. I'm also the founder of PSGE, and I have a burning passion to help others suffering from psychological health issues, as well as advocacy about why mental health matters. Undoubtedly, I truly believe that my passion to assist others, as I said before, is merely a fraction of what I genuinely think I can bring to you if elected and given the opportunity to serve as your new PG rep. I believe I am, as my initials you see over on the screen, EAB. I'm enthusiastic, empathic, effective, and efficient, approachable, amicable, and brave. Be sure to stay connected with me using the handle seen on the slide, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I also have a background in psych, so I want to just share one of my quotes with you all today. Mental illness does not need to be physically seen to understand that it is a psychological wound amongst us. In other words, mental health is just as important as physical health and one's well being. Therefore, I strive to work towards sharing my knowledge and helping those that are in need of any assistance, no matter one's age, sexuality, race, or ethnicity. With that being said, I think that I am very inclusive and would strive my best for the betterment of our student body. Indeed, I believe in being kind and genuine to all living beings. Hence, if given the opportunity to represent you, I'm positive that we will have a successful upcoming academic year. And that's just a little bit about me in a nutshell. Additionally, I also love giving back to the community as I have been involved in numerous voluntary activities and have represented many of the associations of UWI. I'm just going to name a few. The Student Psychology Association, I was the former president, and I had a lot of experiences being PRO as well as public communications marketing officer. I was a International Honor Society psychology chapter. I was part of that, the Peer Counseling Association, and currently on the Behavioral Sciences Student Association. Right? So I want to get to my duty and my aims about why you should vote for me to be the PG rep. I am going to represent you, the PG students of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. I want to aid in addressing any of your students' concerns and issues. Right? I want to help you gain accessibility to financial and psychological assistance. As you know, it's a very hard time now. Right, so moving into my initiatives, I want to develop a structure or a process for students to address their concerns in order to get proper feedback. Right, I plan to implement policies such as students' entitlement of proper feedback in a timely manner when completing a thesis and being able to measure or track their progress. Right, this would be alongside Professor Harry, who is actually the director of the grad studies, and this would be to improve the student supervisor communication. Right, and I want to provide workshops to guide the PG students in writing a thesis, right? Because we at UE, we jump into things and students, they need assistance, right? I want to provide scholarships and funding in accordance with the bursary or STAPS. For students, example, there's the Toastmasters Endowment Fund, right? This actually funds whole accommodation, tuition, welfare, which is like groceries, research projects, including conferences, and that is currently at $3,000, right? That fund. But my aim is to increase this to $6,000 to $10,000, especially as we may be reverting to face-to-face learning, right? And there are other existing funds like the Academic Excellence Fund and the Workshops and Research Fund, which I also intend to improve on the amount of students being eligible to gain this financial assistance. Indeed, I intend to continue to support the initiative of the Guild Women Movement as I support Breaking the Bias, the sales teams for International Women's Day. And last but not least, I hope to reform and revamp the roles and functions of the PG rep so that it reflects consistency in accordance to the St. Augustine Association for postgraduate students and their responsibilities and duties. So kindly, please be reminded to check your UV emails tomorrow. And being your PG rep means continuously supporting and advocating for my fellow students' body as a young leader. There is no I in team. Together as a team, we can make the dream work. So please vote for me as your postgraduate representative tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, well said, Emily. I see we have a question in the chat here. Let me put it on the screen. All right, the feature seems to be taking a second to load. As PG
No problem.
rep, how will you deal with the rising number of students seeking counseling services?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. So, as you know, UV St. Augustine actually has a service called CAPS, and I believe that we need to spread more awareness. So, my job would be to implement and also go into classes and find a way that we could share the information about the contacts and have an easy accessible way that they could actually get the counseling that they need. As you know, a lot of students are going through a lot of stressful times, not just financially but emotionally, and it has been very much impacting, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic. So I really think it's about spreading awareness, and I believe that I can do that.
All right, allow me to put some more questions up on the screen. What are your plans to address the current tuition payment schedule for postgrad students?
Okay, that's a really great question. So I feel that the schedule should be um, basically an option. Like, we can probably reach out in order to find a way to make the options a little bit clearer on the platform when persons are making payments. And I would obviously, if I'm elected, I would contact necessary technical support so that we could try and figure out a way to get the scheduling of the payments to be revamped.
All right, and this will be our last question here. Do you have any plans to help postgraduate students with transitioning to the world of work?
Okay, that's a wonderful question, because as you know, everybody, as they come out of their tuition education, their tertiary education, they are looking for a job, and jobs are very hard right now. So I feel that if I am given the opportunity, I would implement more workshops. I would even liaise with the world of work that already exists in UWI. And again, awareness is something that UWI students need, because we come into UWI and we are very much not aware about the things that are going on campus, and we need to do it through via classes and our lecturers. We need to get them on board as well to push for these things, so that the students would benefit all the things that we are supposed to be benefiting from.
All right, thank you for that response. You have many questions lined up. However, it's time for our next speaker. So, what I'm going to do, I'll have you remain here in the studio with us. And after our
No
next speaker
problem.
makes his address and answers some questions within his own time, I'll be giving both of you the opportunity to respond to the same questions, just as our candidates for treasurer just did. So, thank you once again for being with us. Well spoken. All right, so up next, everyone, we have our next candidate for the position of postgraduate representative. Please welcome to the floor Mr. Bradley Osborne.
Hi, good night. Thank you, Tyler, for that lovely introduction. Just want to shout out to the entire UWI family tuning in tonight. Thank you, and it's of course very important to be here to learn about the initiatives and plans of your future representatives. So I'll start on the next slide, thanks. So before I get into my plans or even who I am, I'd like to just explain where I'm coming from. And particularly a quote I heard not too long ago really shapes my entire perspective on education and its importance. Because of course, for example, with the questions that were asked earlier regarding raising tuition and whatnot, um, education does not just play a role. Tuition is not just the raising of the prices for a particular thing that we purchase, which is education. Education plays a role in the development of us as people, us as satisfied individuals later in our lives, as well as the development of our entire region. And this quote really speaks to that. It says, destroying a nation does not require the use of atomic bombs or the use of low range missiles. It only requires the lowering of the quality of education. Patients die at the hands of such doctors. Money is lost at the hands of such economists and accountants. Humanity dies at the hands of such religious scholars. And justice is lost at the hands of such judges. The collapse of education is the collapse of a nation. And this really speaks to the entire development we get from not just attaining a higher level of education, but just being a part of a university, for example. We see, so even if we look at the performance of our medical sciences students, since the pandemic has started, they have been on the ground, on the field, um, doing more than just learning about medical sciences. You could say they are actually getting experience in saving the world from a pandemic. So just not to take up too much time, let me go to the next slide and just give a little background on myself. So over the last year, I would have served as the guild treasurer, where we would have done many things, function in the capacity as an executive, of course, as well as be the person charged with managing the resources, the financial resources in particular of the guild. So over the year, we would have tried to solve many issues, things like the digital divide, the food insecurity that would have been plaguing us, especially considering the pandemic. We'd have reached out to public and private sector partners to assuage some of these issues. Over the year, for example, in food security, we have reached out to the public sector in the form of the Ministry of Agriculture, who would have given food hampers for those of us who would have indicated we needed support in terms of food. Private sector partners in that same area of food security would have been Extra Food, who we purchased $300 vouchers for similarly for members who would have been facing food security issues. Now, the next point here is something I'm particularly very passionate about, considering that the Guild currently has a reserve fund. It's the accumulated surpluses over the years, and we would have started creating an investment portfolio out of it. So it has accumulated funds over the years, and now we seek to invest those things in capital assets. So in essence, we seek to have the money work for us, seek to have it bring back revenue, create another stream of revenue, such that we could expand things such as scholarships. We could get more funding for the clubs. It's just another stream of revenue where we could do more with. We've never heard an instance of there being something such as too much money. And right now it's the most effective way of using our resources that are endowed to the Guild. And one of the particular things I was seeking to establish after creating that stream of revenue is the Guild Venture Capital Fund. So this in particular is seeking to bridge that gap of funding we face as youths when we have ideas and we want to start initiatives. So having experienced physical campus, I know that many of us, I could speak for myself, every Monday morning I would have had an idea, a business idea, and I would have told my friends that I could have made $1 million. I just need about $100,000 to start it, and I wouldn't have the funds. So this venture capital fund seeks to bridge that gap, give us that funding. And these are just some of the initiatives I'm continuing as treasurer as we speak. So going on to the next slide of what I would like to do as postgraduate representative, of course, would be widening the opportunities available for experience and exposure beyond the classroom. And widening the opportunities speaks to as well the fact that GATE is no longer accessible to us as postgraduate students. I was actually in the transition year when that happened, and it was particularly unfortunate for me in that instance. I know that many of us face similar challenges with that sudden removal. So expanding the scholarships available from the aforementioned investment program we'll be starting, that creates another stream of revenue to flow into creating more scholarships. Experience as well with our public and private sector partners for internships, and even reaching out to, for example, international organizations such as the IMF, the United Nations, to give us experience beyond what the classroom can provide, because we are on the precipice, of course, of becoming specialists in the postgraduate community. And these types of experiences can help us, can expose us to the wider world and help us with the transition into the working world. The next point I would say is ratifying the STAP's constitution for effective resolution of postgraduate issues. So as was mentioned before, there is the issue of communication with the supervisor. These issues, of course, can be solved with various things such as the tracking systems and whatnot. But issues more generally, we would want to have representation on every level, especially the classroom. I believe there are class liaisons currently, but the effectiveness is not there, of course, based on the system that they are governed within. And I think all that traces back to the St. Augustine Association of Postgraduate Students Constitution, which guides the structure of our representation. And I think amending that will see major improvement in the resolution of postgrad issues. And the last point I would say is the Staff Sustainability Fund. And this is something that, of course, flows again from the previous point of the investment portfolio. I would say that this can be created through that other stream of revenue. And the idea behind it is to transform the campus into one that is clean, environmentally benign, and resource efficient, and allow that to be done through the specialized knowledge of postgraduate students. Of course, this ties into the first point as well of gaining that experience and exposure beyond the classroom. This fund will be created to fund activities or projects that transform the campus in the way that was said. And of course, especially for the engineering students, but also for the management students who can do feasibility studies, the economists who could see the feasibility for other projects like it to be replicated, and all the other students can contribute to this and see major benefit in terms of their experience as well. So these are just some of the initiatives I have planned, and I would love to share more, but of course there are time constraints. So thank you for listening thus far.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Osborne. And very quickly, we have some questions here, many questions. So the first question that we received for you is, coming off of the tenure of the first female postgraduate president and previous events, how do you plan to ensure that you end toxic masculinity and misogyny in office?
I think that's a very good question based on the fact that there are many issues in terms of gender that even subconscious action plays a big role. And I think the Guild made a lot of headway by establishing the gender representative. And within the context of reworking the staff's constitution, we would also want some work done in terms of gender representation, gender equity, and ensuring that all issues regarding gender are appropriately outlined in the Constitution for how to treat those matters, for example.
All right, and the next two questions are somewhat related. So, all right, I'll put it on the screen here. What have you done within your current tenure to help end misogyny and the locker room culture of the Guild?
I think I would say personally that I was one that pushed for the establishment of this gender representative. I cannot say that I'm an expert in that field, and especially given that historically gender issues have been skewed in favor of men, where they of course have advantage in workplaces and whatnot. I would say that the best is to deal with experts on this, and that is why I was pushing for that gender representative. And it's their full involvement into the Guild activities, and the Guild, of course, reworking the Constitution as well with how to deal with such issues.
All right, and this will be the last question that I pose for you directly before I transition into the period that I mentioned, where both you and Ms. Bachan will be given the opportunity to respond to the same question. So here we have our next and final question for you individually. Do you believe that your performance as Guild Treasurer was satisfactory to the student body? If yes, why are you choosing to contest postgraduate representative and not seeking re-election as treasurer?
Thank you for that question. I would say that there is a lot that was done over the year, but it felt, of course, you'd always, as a human, want a different experience in terms of even giving service, and that applies to going from treasurer to postgraduate president or postgraduate representative rather. But I would say that there are things that I want to complete in terms of treasurer, and one of those major things I would say, or possibly the only thing I would say, is the establishment of the portfolio. And I am planning to wrap up that within the coming months here. And even if re-elected as postgraduate representative, I will contribute, or no matter what happens, I will contribute to the seeing through of that initiative in particular, because I believe that is not just beneficial for us here, but of course, many future generations. I always tell my colleagues on the council that if my predecessor from 20 years ago had pursued such an initiative, we would be in a much better place to offer scholarships or do any type of work or anything that requires resources in future. And I'm hoping to be that predecessor to my successor 20 years down the road. I think there are many things I can do as postgraduate representative too, now that I'm experiencing what it is.
Great. We'll now pivot into our session where and first up we have a question posed by the incumbent in here. One candidate spoke of amending the Guild Constitution in terms of the functions of the postgraduate rep, while the other addressed the STAPS Constitution. Why did each of you choose this aspect for reform? And on this point, we can start with Ms. Bachan.
Okay, so that's a really great question. Now, I would put a disclosure here that I am for the first time contesting a position on the Guild, so I am not exactly aware of all the stipulations with regards to STAPS. However, I think that looking at the Guild's constitution, there is not very much expansion as to what are the responsibilities and the rules of the postgraduate representative itself. So I feel that if that could be, revamped and, it could look into more specifics and details that would actually help in order to understand what the rule actually entails than just having just like three bare minimum explanation what the rule consists of, because I'm sure that the postgraduate representative has a lot of responsibility, and that needs to be reformed first before we could actually revamp the STAPS constitution. And well, obviously I am not part of that as yet. If I'm elected, maybe I would get to see what the constitution looks like. So
All right,
All right, thank you. And over to you, Mr. Osborne. Same question.
All right, thank you. I would say that I mentioned the STAPS constitution basically because it's under my purview, or would be under my purview as the postgraduate representative, given that they are, by that virtue, president of STAPS. Because the constitution reworking that has been understood, forgive me, it's almost a habit of being on the Guild now that we say that the constitution needs to be reworked. It's been something that has been discussed for quite some time. But of course, moving the mechanisms outlined by the constitution to update the constitution is going to be some work. But it's understood that the Guild constitution, of course, needs to be reworked. It's been last updated in 2009, which is over 10 years ago. So of course the conditions we face are quite different. But for what is particularly under the purview of the postgraduate representative is the STAPS constitution. And that is why I highlighted that in particular. over my presentation.
All right. Thank you for us. Just permit me to share it to the screen. How do you plan on addressing tuition assistance for students, particularly MSc students? Ms. Bachan, we can start with you.
Okay, so like I said when I was presenting, there's the Toastmasters Endowment Fund, right? And that one, it constitutes of the whole accommodation, the tuition, welfare, and even research projects, conferences as well, right? And it's currently $3,000 that they would be getting funded. Now, particularly for MSc students, I would like, if I'm elected, I would try to communicate with the bursary and also like scholarships. If we could implement something that they could raise or even include, if it could go up a certain maximum, so that students would get to benefit. If let's say their grades certain GPA, they could, they would be basically they will be legible, right? There are certain requirements. If it's met, that way they could get extra assistance if they really cannot afford at this time, because again, COVID and it's just a lot, and the prices are just skyrocketing. So that is my best plan in a case like that.
And Mr. Oswan?
Thank you. I would say there are many things. Of course, over the year, I've learned that data plays a big role in the effectiveness of our representation. And without it, we wouldn't know exactly how to aim our representation. So in the case of funding, I would say that we have to learn what areas persons need funding, of course. And for tuition, some maybe for the projects themselves. Even within the realm of tuition, there's the actual payments for the course and then payments for certain things within their projects. And I would say that, of course, reaching out to public and private sector partners, as was mentioned in my presentation, would play a big role for sponsorships and scholarships, sponsorships for scholarships and grants, as well as, of course, in-house from the extra streams of revenue that will be created from the investment program. So between partnerships and increased revenue allowing in-house funding, um, there will be a major expansion for tuition assistance, particularly for postgraduate students.
All right, thank you both for that. I'm gonna have one last question. It's my own question. Of course, we are almost out of time for this segment, so I'm just gonna have you both answer in 20 seconds or less. And that is, if there is a return to in-person classes, how would you feel about a policy requiring all students to be vaccinated for COVID-19? And we can start with whoever is comfortable speaking first.
Sure. I would say, as was mentioned, let me just give a little background. Of course, I'm an economist, so there are many issues I would say that I'm not an expert in, and of course that one would be medical sciences and of course epidemiology. I would say whatever the experts think is the best thing. I would say that we could follow the national guidelines as well, but mainly we would not want to put our students at risk of the virus spreading while being cognizant of what is really necessary to be done.
All right, thank you. And you, Miss Bechan?
Okay, so may I just put a spin to that, because I think that yes, everybody has a choice to get the vaccine or not. However, if following with WHO's protocols as well as the government stipulations, I think that we should follow that, and it would help for the safety of the students. But I'm thinking that if it should be an option for students to probably do online slash in person. Like if persons really cannot, let's say they have a medical condition and they really cannot take the vaccine, I feel that they should have the option to do online classes for some in some way. The lecturers could figure out a way to still accommodate them online, but also have the in-person classes for the majority who are vaccinated and are willing to attend in person. So that's how I think it is the best option in my opinion.
All right, well, thank you both for answering those questions and thank the audience for that. You both fielded a tremendous amount of support and were both very well spoken tonight. So best of luck to both of you tomorrow in the election. And we will now be moving swiftly along on our agenda as we are almost to the end of tonight's proceedings, but we're not quite there yet. So we'll now be moving on to the office of the Vice President. The Vice President serves as the Deputy Chairperson of the Guild Council and the Guild of Students. They are also the Chairperson of the Interclubs Committee, an ex officio member of all recognized clubs and societies, and are responsible for the management of the system of complaints to the Guild Council. While we typically associate the office of the Vice President with many of the parties and fetes we know about and love, the role is definitely twofold in nature, and there's undoubtedly a mountain of work also involved. With that being said, we have with us tonight our single candidate for the position this year who is ready and willing to take on service. So please welcome to the floor the viewing and listening public, Mr. Kyle Bisnath. Mr. Bisnath, the floor.
Good evening to the moderator, Mr. Tyler Alexander, colleagues, fellow candidates, and the viewing audience. As many of you know, the past 2 years has not been the easiest as a result of the challenges and barriers that have been posed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, some of which have manifested in the way in which we conduct affairs here at the UE. But tides are finally beginning to turn. My name is Kyle Bisnath, and I want to be your next Vice President. A vote for me is a vote for representation, visibility, accessibility, and leadership you can not only trust, but depend on. I am committed to rejuvenating engagement in the post-pandemic era while fostering dynamic cooperation to drastically improve student affairs, all in an attempt to quantifiably enhance the overall experience at the UE. As your Vice President, I plan to firstly renew engagement in the post-pandemic era. I understand the unique challenges posed to traditional engagement due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and moving forward in the post-pandemic era, it is my intention to reignite the spirit of engagement and interaction through increased output by means of events and activities that invoke and involve the participation of all faculties. I plan to facilitate this through initiatives such as ClubFest, which would be a dynamic, expansive, and inclusive event aimed specifically to provide students who did not have the opportunity of having a traditional on-campus experience to be fully immersed in getting to know exactly what our clubs and societies are about and the opportunities they offer. This would be conducted throughout the period of 1 week, with different clubs based on their association rotating on a daily basis in order to prioritize student safety as well as to maximize efficiency. Secondly, hot takes. This is an initiative I plan on putting forward that serves as a platform for healthy dialogue among clubs and societies that aim to foster integration among clubs by means of invoking conversation on contemporary issues, challenges, and hot topics that are facing our collective society. This would simultaneously highlight the differing views and opinions of a multicultural campus while striving to achieve a common ground, working towards greater civility and tolerance. Thirdly, Culture Fest. This is an initiative I plan on working closely with the IACC committee chairperson member on in order to foster greater inclusion whilst highlighting the unique cultural contributions of our international and regional students. Secondly, I plan to encourage and foster dynamic cooperation to provide timely assistance when addressing student concerns. As your Vice President, serving the needs of students is my top priority, and I believe it to be absolutely fundamental to address student concerns with urgency and empathy. This is why I intend on enlisting the support and assistance of all faculty department representatives, as well as faculty representatives and department representatives, to create a cohesive and comprehensive support network for students' needs and concerns. I plan to facilitate this through the implementation of a UESA complaints committee that enlists the assistance and support of all elected faculty representatives and department reps in order to optimize performance. Thirdly, I plan on enhancing the way in which we handle student complaints. As your Vice President, I intend to create an innovative and interactive forum that is designed specifically for managing student complaints and grievances and allowing students to maintain a level of privacy when seeking assistance. This would simultaneously be conducted while ruling out any unnecessary clutter in order to maximize efficiency. Fourthly, I plan to work closely with the clubs and societies in order to further enhance and boost the integration within the association. I understand that communication amongst the expansive network of clubs and societies at the UE can sometimes be a challenge, which is why I intend on bridging the gap and forming consistent and meaningful relationships among clubs, committees, and societies, which will foster integration, boost camaraderie, and morale not only among the student body, but also within the guild and its associations alike. I plan to facilitate this through the use of compulsory seminars for all ICC executives that will focus on financial literacy when managing organizational funds, how to be an effective and efficient leader, as well as conflict resolution. Moreover, I intend on amending the frequency of ICC meetings, thus increasing communication amongst the executive, so that the experience of leaders can be improved and thus directly impact the experience of students. In addition, I plan on conducting team-building exercises to further increase cohesion and strengthen the bonds of unity within the guild. Furthermore, I intend to update the UE Club archives, which was an initiative put forward by former Vice President Tariq Ali, so that we can continue to highlight the valuable contributions at the UE through their clubs and societies and recognizing the development that these clubs and societies have had towards the development of campus life. Lastly, I plan to be accessible to not only the general student body, but also to all societies, clubs, and communities. As your Vice President, I don't just want to be a name without a face. Bridging the gap between the executive and the student body is of utmost importance to me. Thus, it is my intention to implement an open door policy that serves as a safe space to all students, regardless of demographic disposition, allowing for greater depth in the relationship among the support of the executive and the student body. Students matter. The concerns of students matter. Your voices matter and deserve to be heard, and I want to listen so I can amplify your voices. On March 24th, vote for representation that you deserve. Thank you so much. I will now be happy to take any questions that you all may have.
All right, well spoken, Mr. Business. Certainly, we are waiting for some questions in the chat. And while we wait for them to come in, I will ask a question myself. And that is, do you think that it's worthwhile to continue hosting large events in a virtual format if, for instance, huge sums of money are spent on an event that only pulls in a few hundred people at most?
Thank you so very much for the question, Tyler. I definitely believe that is an amazing question. So in relation to events that I anticipate to be this semester, I understand that we are supposed to have a blended format to some extent. And I think that it's important that we don't neglect the students that would have to remain online, because I imagine there will still be protocols that are put in place for student safety, of course. So therefore, I think that it is wise to consult with clubs and societies in order to ensure that the experience that we have virtually is maximized, essentially, so that we ensure that we're not wasting resources, but we're still including students that don't have access to take part in the activities that may be held on campus for those that are there. So I definitely think that it is important that we continue to support both levels of students, not only who are on campus, but also those who are home as well, just to foster that inclusion.
All right, well said. And we have our first question from the incumbent FMS representative. What are your plans for reforming the ICC? You mentioned increasing ICC meetings, but each group is treated as a club, and representational bodies such as student associations do not benefit from this. And she continues, therefore, increasing meetings and not the meeting specific needs of each group won't do the groups that feel unheard any good. So how do you treat with that statement?
I would definitely like to thank Melissa for the question, and I think that is the exact point of the meeting, so that groups that feel not heard would definitely have the opportunity. Like I said, I plan to be an ear that would listen to the concerns of the members of the ICC. I think that when it comes to meetings, I definitely plan on meeting the executives because, for obvious reasons, I can't meet with everybody that is a part of each club and society. But I think it's also important to note that the executives of these bodies are who conduct and who delegate tasks to the relevant parties to ensure the smooth function of events and societies. So therefore, I think if I maintain close relationships with them, and I plan on increasing frequency in meetings as well, to just keep that key communication train going, to be in constant flow of communication, to bounce ideas off of each other, to listen to the concerns that they're facing, and to just work with the executives. Because I think it is through the experience of the executives and how they are able to manage difficult tasks and issues that definitely impact the experience of students via trickle-down effect. So therefore, if we're able to have a better relationship with them, then ultimately students also have a better relationship and a better experience in their clubs and societies.
All right, a great response there. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, so I will field one of my own. What is your position on the Student Amenities Fund? Do you think that the services being provided under that fund are adequate, or do you think alternative services should be provided?
Thank you so much for the question, Tyler. I definitely believe that currently the amenities fee, it does serve a purpose. As to where I stand on it specifically, like my colleague before me, Makisha, said, I don't believe firmly in speaking out against any specific thing unless we consult the relevant parties that are it's relevant to. So therefore, I believe if there were to be any sort of considerations to that, we would definitely and absolutely have to consult with the relevant parties in order to make the best decision that is for the university as well as for the student body as well. But currently, I do believe that it serves a functional purpose for the furtherance of the campus.
All right, thank you for that response. And I don't think we have any more questions coming in. So in closing, are there any final remarks you would like to leave with the audience tonight?
Definitely. I just want to encourage you all to definitely vote. Like I said, I plan to be somebody that you can interact with, somebody that you can feel comfortable expressing your concerns to. I would consider myself to be a pretty approachable person. And definitely I am here so that you could speak through me and for your concerns and your voices to be heard.
We had one question. This will be our last question.
Sure.
There's one intake period for clubs currently. Therefore, if students obtain the idea and form a club mid-semester, they go the entire year without being a part of or having the support from the ICC. What are your thoughts or plans there?
Melissa, I do appreciate all of your questions, and this is in fact a very relevant question to me as well. I think in relation to this, I believe that the way in which we handle these new clubs currently could use adjustment, and I am definitely open to this. Like I said, I'm here to listen to feedback, and if it is that this is the experience that a lot of clubs and societies are having in order to gain recognition, then absolutely we need to fix this. We do need to speak with the relevant departments and persons responsible in order to get this process adjusted so that everybody can be accommodated and so that we don't have to wait an entire semester for you to be included in events and feel left out, because again, I do want to foster integration and inclusion. So I would definitely work to the best of my capacity to ensure that this is something that is considered.
All right, thank you for that response and for your responses to all of our questions and those of the audience. You have a huge amount of support here in the chat, so best of luck to you tomorrow in election day. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank you so much, Mr. Alexander. You as well.
All right. Moving swiftly along, we are now at the last stage of tonight's proceedings. Well, just about. Last but certainly not least on our agenda tonight is our candidate for one of the most important positions on the Guild Council, and that is the Guild President. According to our constitution, the Guild President serves as the chairperson of the Guild Council and the Guild, and is responsible for seeing to the welfare of all workers of the Guild in conjunction with the Guild Secretary, and ensuring that disciplinary action taken against a worker is in compliance with national and university rules and regulations. The Guild President is responsible for ensuring the efficient running of the Guild Council and the Guild, and ensuring the maintenance and development of fraternal ties with the International Union of Students, student bodies in other countries, and the guilds of all the campuses of the University of the West Indies. The President has the power to make decisions on behalf of the executive where necessary, to create and coordinate ad hoc committees where necessary, subject to the review of the Guild Council, and is an ex officio member of all standing committees. Without further ado, please welcome to the floor Mr. Kobe Sandy, incumbent Guild President and sole candidate for the office of the Guild President in the 2022 Guild Council election.
Thank
Mr.
you very
Sandy,
much, Mr.
yours.
Alexander, for your introduction and for, of course, defining what the president is about. Of course, words can't really describe it, but of course, we go about it nevertheless. Members of the UB St. Augustine campus, onlookers and supporters of all candidates, I greet you in this wonderful evening. I want to share with you this evening the review of what has been done thus far within the Guild of Students in this academic year, and why it is prudent for us to continue the successes and continue the progress we have made in the various networks we would have established in all sectors to advance the interests of the student body. I have been around the Guild for the last 3 years. First 10 years National Affairs Chairperson, which was a very successful one, a very achieving one, and of course, I will always say that the NSC is one of the best committees on this council. And after, of course, being selected by you to be your president, to navigate the student engagement and navigate student life in the height of COVID-19, I certainly understood the assignment and continue to persevere when it comes to representing your interests as the students in the UB St. Augustine campus. However, we would have made certain strides as a Guild organization. We would have made certain achievements within the Guild organization. And of course, as I said before, when you are going to bear fruit, you must, of course, plant the seed, sow the seed, and of course, grow it. And it is my intention that in the next academic year, we will see fruit for what we would have sowed in this academic year. Out of my 120 engagements as president, it was all in a bid to, of course, represent the interests of you within the campus space, within the university space, within the national, regional, international space. And I can say at every level that I now call out there, we had stable representation and consistent advocacy. And I want to go into what is those things that will bear fruit come the next academic year once you re-elect me come tomorrow, praise the Lord. And I want to go through how every student, how every member in every faculty would be impacted and would be, of course, given an opportunity to advance their skills and their talent, and of course, to have good living. We would have had to sensitize ourselves to the unprecedented environment. And of course, in the next 10 years, we are seeing things that we must respond to. And I saw in the comments, and I saw, of course, other candidates speaking about the reopening of campus, the increase of fees. These are the realities that we will face very soon. And we must have a position, we must have a voice on what we would do for those things. The first thing is reopening of campus. We are seeing the light of day as to what the campus is going to do when it comes to reopening the campus. Of course, no plan is really out there for us to really digest, But we know and we feel that the campus would be looking to reopen some way or some form come the next academic year. And we as a guild of students must, of course, quickly adapt and be proactive in how we respond to it. We know that the issues we faced before COVID on a physical campus will return for us, and we must respond to it. And that's why the first thing we must do when it comes to reopening of campus, we understand the security and the safety of our members, especially our women and girls on the campus. That was an issue before COVID, and certainly we don't want to go back to experience it. So what we're going to do, we will write the principal, the director of campus security, as well as the commissioner of police. And we will, of course, identify those things that is needed to ramp up security on campus. When it comes to increased patrols, when it comes to more lighting, when it comes to, of course, looking at self-protection, when it comes to camera, and of course, that kind of security, when it comes to, of course, having that surveillance over the campus. We want to ensure that we go to our campus prepared for the student body. And that also goes to the buildings and the facilities on campus. We would ensure that they are up to par so that it can be fully prepared for when students return. The increase of fees. The position should be that there must be extensive consultation with the administration and the student body. We are aware that it is a reality that we will soon face, that fees will go up. However, the administration is called upon to have consultation. I can say that when the principal would have made the announcement, my first question, and the only question from those on the campus council to the principal, was that will there be consultation? And will there be, of course, gradual and, of course, increased payment options for students when it comes to increasing these fees? Because we don't want to reach a society where students will be living like how those who live in the US, where you are living years paying off student loans, where you have to live in your vehicle because you can't afford to have accommodation because of tuition fees. We do not want to reach that state. Hence, we must have this consultation, and not just with the council, Every faculty must have it with their students. All the clubs should be involved when it comes to creating what is the arrangement going forward on what will be the contributions by the student body. And of course, supporting the most vulnerable among the student corps. And we would have done that well in this academic year. You have heard the PG candidate mention, of course, that we would have reached out to the Ministry of Agriculture, and the first thing we would have done, reach out to NAMDEVCO, who would have given us 70 pounds by 200 hampers to students to ensure that, of course, families are well fed. We would have ensured that we get food vouchers to ensure that those regional students who are living in this country are supported as well in this time of lockdown and so on. We would have done that. We would have ensured that these things are done. Those who lived on halls and are forgotten in this time, we would have ensured that the most vulnerable continues to be serviced by the Guild of Students. We must, of course, also represent the interests of the student body outside of the classroom. Because when you leave the classroom, when you leave with your first class honors or your upper class seconds or your degree, your masters and so on, we are faced in a society that is not really nice to graduates, not really nice to young people. And we must be the one to represent that. Because if not us, then who? If not this, then what? We must represent the interests of all. And of course, in our the objective of the Guild is to represent the interests of the student body nationally, locally, as well as internationally. For every faculty, we would continue to flourish what we would have started when it comes to creating and networking with various stakeholders in the government, the private sector, and civil society to ensure that, of course, we get maximum representation. And of course, opportunities can flow to the student body. For FST students, I would have wrote the Minister of Technology or the new minted Ministry of Digital Transformation under Hasselbachus. The first thing we would have done was to write the minister for a meeting And I can say that a partnership has already been created with that newly minted ministry responsible for digitizing the public sector in this country. And who must be involved when it comes to impacting that national policy? Our DCIT students should be involved when it comes to that move the government is taking to digitize the economy and so on. And that is why that partnership will be flourishing come the next academic year, so that, of course, our FST students can be involved in that crafting of such a policy. Our students in agriculture, we already have a collaboration with NAMDEFCO and the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to ensure that, of course, our agri entrepreneurs, our agri technicians, our upcoming 21st century farmers would be able to have opportunities to establish themselves when they leave the campus, and even as well to impact or influence current policy when it comes to improving the agricultural industry in this country and the region. We come next week, Monday, I have a meeting with the Minister of Trade and Industry, and we will ensure, and the first thing we want to propose is that the Guild of Students have a subsidized vending area at the newly established Maruga Agro-Processing Facility to ensure that our students who here on campus that have crops can go down there and, of course, process their goods to make better lifestyle for themselves, as well as, of course, to make good living and become their own bosses. That is what we want to do, as well as to ensure that, of course, that those students who are in entrepreneurship can, of course, export their things and receive incentives and, of course, provision from the ministry to establish their business. That is the vision that we have when it comes to transforming the Guild organization. Those students in engineering, we have already made a partnership, or of course we will already receive agreement in principle by two prominent contractors to have engineering students as trainees and apprentices in their companies. That is the kind of foresight we are looking at when it comes to the Guild of Students under my leadership. And we must continue that in the next academic year. Those in FSS, we have already buttressed a relationship with OJT and the National Employment Service, so that, of course, our persons who are in management, political science, IR, would be able to have a space when it comes to getting training opportunities in these public offices, so that, of course, they can utilize their talents and their education in transforming public policy. There's already a partnership. And of course, what we want to do is to have the Guild recommend people to be in these services, in these programs, so that, of course, we have better living and better lifestyles for those who we have to represent. Those in the Faculty of Sports, small and neat, we want to inculcate the sporting, our sporting academics into the professional area of sport with Sport TT, the Ministry of Sport and these sporting agencies, so that you can bring your knowledge, you can bring your expertise when it comes to developing the sporting aesthetic of the country and the region. We want to be able to reach out to these stakeholders to utilize your skill sets and abilities that we are investing in this country. Those in FHE, we know that, of course, the pandemic would have disrupted our creatives and the creative industry. We want to, of course, be able to address that and formulate a relationship with Tobago House of Assembly, as well as the Tobago Performing Arts Company, the Ministry of Culture and the Arts, to ensure that our creatives in FHE and those who are outside of FHE be given an opportunity to influence public policy and be given opportunities as well to make use of their creative skills and talents, as well as to monetize and market their abilities to the nation. Those in law, we have already have a relationship with the Attorney General Office and Ministry of Legal Affairs. And now there is a new minister, there's a new AG. We are going back there to buttress that relationship so that the Law Society would be a staple stakeholder when it comes to the office of the AG and when it comes to law and making legislation. Our medical science students, we understand the issue when it comes to trying to matriculate yourself into the working space. And as a lobby organization that is the Guild of Students, we would engage the powers that be, such as the RHAs, the Ministry of Health, and so on and so forth, to discuss how we can make it easier for our medical science students to be matriculated into the working force. We will do that. And of course, some might say, I want to go in all the ministries, you want to post picture and so on to post, but I will do what I need to do to ensure that the membership is able to have their priorities at the top of every agenda of every single sector in this country and the region. Transforming the Guild organization is also another main thing on my agenda as president, because we always talk about the various issues within the Guild, clubs and marketing and publications and communication and the Guild laws and the bylaws, and so we always have these issues. We want, however, to commission a organizational audit. We will call it a commission that will look into these issues that we have within the Guild space. And we would have professionals in the fields of HR and marketing and law, banking and finance, public sector management. We will have those persons' expertise in that area. We would bring them, and we, of course, look into our organization, create a plan that will cover 5 years and will be, of course, the plan to improve the organization of the Guild of Students for other guilds to come to follow and to improve on that mandate. We will do that. And I see, of course, the arrows coming to tell me my time is up. But I want to say
Yes,
to Maurice
Mr.
Lord,
Sandy.
vote Kobe Sandy and make the right choice. I thank you very much.
Yes, no problem. Don't jump off the stream just yet, because of course there are many questions lined up in the chat, and I also have my own questions for you. So the first question, I'm going to start with the first question that I have, and then we'll move on to those in the chat. Seeing that you've served 2 terms on the Guild Council and we have not yet seen any constitutional reform, what guarantee can you give to the students that in this tenure there are concrete plans for constitutional reform, and what would that entail?
Well, of course, when it comes to reforming the Constitution, it is very complex, and that is why it wasn't achieved for the last how much years. We have been talking about reform since Adam knew he was a boy. What is the issue is that there is the one Guild Constitution that is, of course, amalgamation of all of the councils, all of the guilds, from Mona, Kayville, Five Islands, and so on and so forth. But there is not a willingness let me rephrase. In order for us to see reform of our branch, the one guild constitution must first be addressed and must first also be approved, because that is approved by the University FNGPC. That's one of the highest bodies when it comes in the UB, and they are the ones to approve any reform that we would promote. So if the St. Augustine campus brings it, it will be shut down until all the campuses agree on what will be the one Guild constitution. And that's why we have these issues. However, to, of course, bring solution to the table, once, of course, we elected, we will have to look into that one Guild. And that's why I propose the commission with this expertise to look at the issues Kayville have, Mona have, St. Augustine have, Open Campus have with it, what University Legal have, all the issues that we have collectively, look at it, and of course really bring that home. And once you bring that home, we will finally see reform, but reform cannot happen on the Guild at St. Augustine alone, because it requires that approval from the higher authorities, who will only look at the one Guild constitution.
All right, thank you for that. And another question of my own before we move on to the audience. What plans do you have to secure the equal representation of women and other minority groups on campus?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for that. I would say that just today, I received from IGDS Ignite the final copy of the terms of reference for the establishment of the Gender Affairs Officer. And if you would allow me to go into the responsibilities of the gender affairs officer that I received, I would say, okay, right. So of course, this is the first office, the first time in Guild history that there is a gender affairs officer. And I would have worked closely with IGDS Ignite as well as Ms. Ananjit from IGDS when it comes to crafting this. And I can say, and of course, also kudos to President Anderson, who also was the one behind it to start in the first place. It is now completing under this tenure. It will appear as well in the council for ratification. There is, of course, in the gender affairs officer, this person will promote more equitable leadership of women and students with diverse expression of gender and sexuality on the Guild, including in the highest office of Guild President, to effectively represent the views of students of the IGDS, to act as a voice to and for the Guild on matters of gender, gender-based violence, and women's rights within the UE, and in public, whether it be nationally, regionally, and internationally, to guide the Guild Council in representation of all such matters, to educate students on issues, matters of gender-based and sexual violence, and LGBTQ plus and women rights, to provide a safe space for LGBTQ community members and women. This can be done in conjunction with the IGDS and other NGOs on and off campus to provide a safe space for the above mentioned, as well as to intervene to provide guidance, support, training to all Guild councillors on interacting with and dealing with matters of gender, gender-based and sexual violence, gender and sexual justice and women's rights. This is what is about to come and will be approved, and we will have a gender affairs officer come next academic year, first time in our Guild history.
All right, thank you for that very cohesive response, Mr. Sandy. And of course, now we have questions from the audience. However, we do also have a timeline, a time limit. So I'm going to
ask the questions. They said they want to know about the president, and I think you should ask them as they come.
Of course. So first up, we have one from Mr. Jeremiah Matura. Seeing that for 2 consecutive years, this position has been contested by one candidate and it's traditionally a hot contest, what are your plans for succession planning after you demit?
That is very important. And I would say that this would be my final year on the council. And because it's my final year on the council, you see that commission that I was talking about? That commission that will look into the organizational processes of the Guild of Students. We often have an issue when it comes to handover. This commission will go in depth and will provide a strategic plan that will span at least 5 years on how to improve the Guild space. When it comes to clubs and funding, when it comes to approval process, when it comes to Guild assisting students, when it comes to our marketing strategies, all of those things will be considered. When it comes to representation structure within the Guild, we are going to improve those things with the commission who's going to look at it and give expertise. They will, of course, work on it, give the council the report, we will adopt it, and it will, of course, be the strategic plan that every president must continue going forward. So when, of course, the newly elected president for the next academic, for the year after this one comes in, they will be responsible really for being the first president to execute what the report says. This academic year will be gathering information, doing the consultations, engaging all of these societies and so on and these things to have them involved in the report. And the next academic year, that president should be responsible for starting the process to improve it with the recommendations. The Guild cannot be fixed in a year. It can't be fixed in 2 years. It will require strategic planning and strategic succession that this will engender.
All right, thank you for that. And our next question, and unfortunately, we must keep things on time, as it would not be fair to go over the limit, as other candidates also had to comply with the limit. So please be as brief as we can here, because you seem to have got many questions. So we have one. Although the UWI is a regional institution, members of the regional cohort often feel like they come second when policies and decisions are being made by the university and the guild. What policies were implemented to assist regional members, and how do you plan to further support these students?
Of course, thank you very much for that question. I would say that, of course, we would have, of course, trying to engage and to revitalize the our island associations in this tenure. However, that didn't come up to par, of course. But this year, with the newly elected IACC, we would work closely to really revitalize that. When it comes to support, we would, of course, I would have mentioned, of course, the food support initiative we would have started. There are many regional students who live in Trinidad and Tobago right now, and of course those students who live at Sal Hall and JGI are predominantly right now regional students. Last December, when I saw that regional students would remain on hall and not be able to go home for Christmas to meet their families, well, we are home eating with ham and lamb and jam. We have, of course, students in JGI and Sal Hall who don't know where the meal coming from. I would have ensured that every student who's had to spend Christmas and New Year's in Sal and JGI receive the best Christmas lunch that they could receive to honor them and to, of course, make them feel appreciated. I would have done the same as well as NACC. When I, of course, have my own Pondraken business, I would have sponsored 5 bottles and I would have bring it at Sal Hall. That's when we now had COVID, to ensure that our regional students were stranded to get some feeling of Christmas joy. And of course, those 2 simple things, we will continue to improve that. And of course, now as campus is going to reopen, we will re-establish those associations that have been quiet for some time, and of course, support them the best way we can, and network with bodies like the UNDP, UNICEF, and these agencies to, of course, include you in the decision-making process and opportunities as well.
All right, thank you. And we have 6 more minutes, so I think we could take a couple more questions. Let us go with this one. We hear a lot about meetings with ministers, and students have complained about the apparent politicizing of the guild/position. What are your thoughts on this?
Excellent. I would say that, of course, those people who are in the position to make a difference, the Guild of Students must be the ones to collaborate and to network with those people. I don't agree that the guild is being politicized, and if people are saying that, I really don't take it to heart, because it is those persons who have the power of the pen. It is those persons who make policies. It is those persons who make law. And we have been complaining about, example, housing issues. We, as young people, it's difficult for us to establish ourselves in society and get affordable housing. We have students who pay in money in rent and are living, of course, in inhumane areas, and of course, landlords are taking advantage of students. We would have met the Minister of Housing then last 2 weeks ago to talk about the Rental Registration Act, and the minister told me, Minister of Housing then told me that this is the first time that, of course, I'll be having people making noise about that act, because people are not making noise about it. The Guild of Students would have brought up that issue to the minister, so that, of course, we can bring that legislation to the fore to regulate how rent is, of course, administered. So that, of course, students who are being advantaged by people to pay high rents for little spaces would be a thing of the past. We must do what is needed to network with these stakeholders who have the power of the pen and who is responsible for the governance of the country. It can be PDP, PNM, UNC, NAR, TOP. We would engage them to ensure that things are done for the Guild of Students and for the membership at large.
All right, thank you for that. And there's another question here. It's very related to another one we received, so I'll put this one up on the screen. Many students are unsatisfied with the performance of some councillors this year. If elected, Will you be ensuring that councillors who do not perform and fail to attend meetings are reprimanded in accordance with the Constitution?
That is, of course, and that is a given. When it comes to performance of of councillors, the power lies in the student body. You elected us, and you are the ones to hold us to account. You have the power to recall a councillor who is failing to meet the standard that they would have promised you. I cannot remove anybody because, of course, that is not afforded in the Constitution. I can't revoke somebody's election. You have the power to do that. When it comes to meetings and so on, there is a mandate that when you miss 3 meetings, you are out. And for this tenure, we would have invoked that on 2 occasions. And you could go back in our page, and you can see on 2 occasions we would have invoked that article, who would have missed 3 consecutive meetings without apology. We would have done that because, you know why? I believe that if you come here to say that you want to do X, Y, and Z to help the student body, and you fail to do that, you should not be here in the Guild of Students, and the student body has a right to ensure that you are reprimanded according to Ms. Singh, who would have said it here. So we will continue to do that, and of course I encourage the student body to hold your councillors who are underperforming to account.
All right, thank you for that. And I'm trying to find the other question that I had seen, but the chat is so extensive with support and questions that it is difficult to navigate. So I will simply read it from what I recall. And it went something along the lines of, aside from the gender affairs officer, what would you do in your personal capacity to ensure that female councillors feel heard, respected, and so on the council?
So aside from the gender affairs officer, in my personal capacity, I believe that women equally have a major voice. I believe that many women I have worked with show me that they work extremely efficient, effective, and even better than men. And I work with women most of my life. In my personal capacity as a man, as a male president, of course, it would be to ensure that, of course, those in the council respect people. One, you must respect people. And if you don't respect people, how could you respect women? We would ensure that respect is there. We would ensure, of course, that there will be a safe space. So utilizing the gender affairs officer, we are also going to ensure that there is continued gender sensitivity in the council. We're going to ensure that, of course, even in planning, gender lens planning, we're going to bring external people like femininity, Caribbean Women in Leadership Forum. We're going to bring these people, of course, to provide that awareness to, of course, the men, for them to be aware of themselves, aware of what is said, and as well, of course, to ensure that, of course, the guild as a body, it continues in that stead to improve woman and man relationships and gender relationships. So I would do it once, of course, in my best ability to ensure that that respect is given. And I respect women, and I respect women very deeply. So, of course, it wouldn't be against my principle or against my, nature to support that in that stead.
All right. Thank you for about a time for our president. So thank you for your responses. You seem to have garnered a tremendous amount of support in the chat. So best of luck to you tomorrow, as well as all of our other candidates. And I will just deliver some closing remarks before we end. So thank you once again, Mr. Sandy.
Thank you so much. All the best.
All right, well, that brings us to an end of tonight's substantive proceedings. Thank you to all our candidates for your remarkable addresses tonight. And thank you to the viewers for your excellent questions. Please note that elections are scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and the voting window will last for 12 hours, closing at 8 p.m. Secure links to vote using individual ballots will be distributed via email, automatically tallied, subject to the scrutiny of an independent observer, automated computer checks to ensure that there are no irregularities, and reviewed by the team in-house accountants at Election Buddy Incorporated, the third-party service provider for our election, before our results are published. Thank you for attending our 3-day public forum series. Please check out the recordings for the first 2 installments if you haven't already, available on Facebook at the UESTA Guild and on YouTube at UESTA Guild respectively. And be sure to cast your vote tomorrow. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your night.